Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Well, we have a reporter who was on the ground in Kenosha. I mean, really at the center of the ugliest of the violence. Actually interviewed the killer before this all happened. So we're going to talk to him directly about what exactly is going on there. We also have the one and only Dr. Cornel West to talk to us about the People's Party convention and also to give his thoughts on the DNC and the RNC and what is going on in the world right now. But we wanted to start with the RNC, and as we've been doing, we'll do the kind of good and the bad. But I think we're going to start with the good today.
We'll start with the good today, yeah. But we have to say, over at the top, it was boring.
It was boring.
It was a very boring night. Not their best. The second night really hit home. They had all those workers, and they had a much thematically. I thought that a lot more of it stitched together. Last night was this weird amalgamation. They had like one worker who we will play for you guys, and there was some, like with the war, but in general, it was a slew of like not very impressive speakers. There were a few exceptions, and really it culminated with Pence's speech, which was just very boilerplate, traditional conservative stuff that you would have heard at any convention, from 1965 till today.
It actually sort of felt like Pence designed last night.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There was a lot of focus on abortion issues and faith, and that was kind of a central piece of it. But overall, it felt like just a lot of kind of conventional politicians going out and reading a standard issue speech was how it came off to me.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the one highlight, I always want to give a shout out to actual workers who appear at some of these political conventions. This one was a Minnesota logger. Let's take a listen to him.
America needs us to keep building, and we can't wait to be a part of it. But the last time Joe Biden was in the White House, Minnesota lost nearly half of its mills, thousands of jobs, and experienced nearly a decade of decline. It was a similar story in other parts of the country. The administration just didn't seem to care. In 47 years in Washington, Joe Biden hasn't done anything for the timber industry. When plants closed in Duluth, Sartell, Cook, and Bemidji, they were just numbers on a paper to the Obama-Biden administration. To me, they were people and jobs and families.
Second time so far in the convention, they're making a hard play for Minnesota. Interesting, actually, Minnesota, the polls are much tighter than a lot of people think. In 538's, tipping point analysis, it's right between blue and red. Trump barely lost Minnesota last time around, so they are very much either trying to make up possible loss in Michigan or Wisconsin by trying to win over Minnesota. But overall, you have this Democratic mayor. You have the Democratic mayor speaking about jobs lost to China, speaking at the convention. Then you have this logger. I think that these are very, very effective when aimed at working class communities in that particular state and across the industrial Midwest.
It's interesting your point about Minnesota, because that was one of the closest states last time around. Hillary Clinton did win it, but just barely. So it does seem like they are making a very explicit play for that state. And it's just remarkable to me always how often the quote-unquote regular people that they bring out are so much more effective.
They make the perfect case, yeah. It's like Pence talks and talks.
Right, and he comes off very authentic. I mean, this is something that really hit home with him. He really felt like the Obama-Biden administration really didn't see him, care about his life, care about his job, care about his family. And look, I mean, on the merits, there are environmental concerns. That was what Obama-Biden was focused on. But in terms of just the politics of it, this kind of a case really lands. It's what they did a lot of on night 2 that worked pretty well. I'm going to talk in my radar about how there was kind of this weirdness of you had a lot of working class people making the case for standard issue GOP policies, but the aesthetic of it does work really well. This was basically all in that vein from last night.
That was at the top.
That was pretty much it.
Yeah, and that was the disappointing part. And they did hit another good foreign policy theme, which if they ran with it and, kept hammering it home as they did twice last night, both Keith Kellogg, Rick Grinnell's speech. We'll tell you about Grinnell's speech later. It was also a very interesting highlight. But I thought Keith Kellogg, as somebody who has been with the president for 4 years, actually made a pretty effective case on the anti-war. Let's take a listen.
I have witnessed every major foreign policy and national security decision by the president. I have been in the room where it happened. I saw only one agenda and one guiding question when tough calls had to be made. Is this decision right for America? When President Donald Trump took office, Decades of failed foreign policy had crippled us. He faced wars without end in sight, creation of failed states like Libya and Syria, a past that allowed a terrorist caliphate to grow, and leadership in Washington that allowed our military to atrophy while we spent trillions of dollars abroad instead of investing at home.
I think it's an effective case, and it's actually a direct rebuttal to John Bolton being like, I was actually in the room where it happened.
Yeah.
I think he had another moment where he said explicitly, he's like, Donald Trump is not a hawk. He is a person who wants peace. Now, again, some of the actions of the Trump administration have been explicitly hawkish. Some have not been. It's been an entirely mixed bag whenever it comes to foreign policy. But again, if you're the only person even aesthetically espousing the idea that war in Afghanistan and Iraq is bad, I don't think it came up once at the Democratic National Convention. Not one single time. And they can't do it because Biden beat the war drum for Iraq and refuses to apologize for it.
Well, and they decided to bring out people like Colin Powell to make the case for him also. To me, the messaging on foreign policy has been as schizophrenic at this convention as like the actual policy in the administration has been.
Very true.
So you have people like him. We're going to play some of Richard Grenell later on that sort of like America first, bring the troops home, end the endless wars. Rand Paul made the same case yesterday. The original kind of 2016 messaging around foreign intervention and how that will go in the Trump administration. But then you had people making the exact opposite case of like, we need Trump back there because he's strong and he took out Qasem Soleimani and he took out ISIS. And we're going to play a little bit of Dan Crenshaw. He was certainly in that direction. But you had a lot of hawks who were making the exact opposite case. And again, that's been the push and pull in this administration. So you have seen some efforts to try to come to a deal with the Taliban and bring our troops home. But then on the other hand, he hasn't actually managed to do it, right? So you've had all this time. You promised to do this thing, as Barack Obama before you promised as well, still hasn't happened. Iran, to me, is the most blatantly obvious example here.
And it is the most glaring. It is the most glaring hypocritical action that the administration takes.
I mean, he brought us right up to, you didn't start any new wars, but you came real damn close, a lot closer than any of us want, and it was basically out of luck that we avoided that circumstance because of the provocative actions, in particular assassinating Qasem Soleimani. So on the one hand, when I look at an individual delivery like that, I can appreciate that's effective, right? And I think it's a much more effective case against Joe Biden than some of the other cases that they have been the Trojan horse for Marxism, all that stuff that we've been, making fun of them here for a long time. It is a much more effective case. It lands because Biden is vulnerable on this issue. But then overall, if you look at the arc of the convention, it'd be hard to say what Trump's actual views on any of this really is, because you see both cases being made.
No, you're right. And we're going to get to that very closely when we get to the bad, which was Dan Crenshaw's speech, actually, which very much focused on, like, rebuild our military. It was almost like a Reagan-esque, like, we have to rebuild the military, project power abroad, all of that. These things are in direct conflict in many ways with some of the ways that the Trump administration had effectively talked about foreign policy, or at least the Trump campaign in 2016. There was another interesting moment. This was with Kayleigh McEnany, where I think she used kind of a personal story of her, of illness and of recovery and trying to humanize Trump. And we talked about this, which is that with the Democrats going all in on Trump is bad, Trump is sexist, he's the meanest person on earth, he's the most horrific monster. If you can just effectively humanize him on a few occasions throughout the campaign or throughout the RNC with Melania's speech and with this particular moment, you give people at least some justification for, I don't like the guy, but he's not what they say he is. And that will make me vote for him. Let's take a listen.
During one of my most difficult times, I expected to have the support of my family, but I had more support than I knew. As I came out of anesthesia, one of the first calls I received was from Ivanka Trump. As I recovered, my phone rang again. It was President Trump calling to check on me. I was blown away. Here was the leader of the free world caring about my circumstance. At the time, I had only met President Trump on a few occasions. But now I know him well, and I can tell you that this president stands by Americans with pre-existing conditions.
So for me, this one kind of spans the good and the bad. Kayleigh's a talented speaker.
It's probably the best speaker.
Very comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, way better than most of the politicians last night were like, oh, God, which I'd say the same.
You could tell.
About the Democratic convention. You just go like, are these really the best? This is your job to speak to people, and this is what. So she's a good speaker, and obviously we all feel terrible for what she's gone through, which is something that so many women have experienced either personally or loved ones around them. On the other hand, it's kind of like a low bar if the thing that you're really amazed at is that he called you. I mean, what kind of a jerk wouldn't call you after the fact? And then to make matters, in my view, worse, and I would say the same thing about the Democrats and the hypocrisy of going out and being like, healthcare is a right, and then not having a plan to make healthcare a right and not a privilege. This president does not stand with people with pre-existing conditions. He's done a lot to undermine Obamacare and the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So, and by making that case so explicitly, of course, like, people are obviously going to point that out and say, well, on the facts, that is just not true.
Yeah, I think you're right. When he doesn't help himself with the stupid lawsuit in order to try and kill Obamacare at the Supreme Court. And yet, I do think it is aesthetically, again, a lot of what we're talking about here is aesthetics. Whenever it comes to substance, it's a very mixed bag. We'll be the first people to tell you so. But if this is what you're digesting, it's an effective attack against you. He's a sexist, racist monster, right? And if you have these types of things that you roll up every night after night after night, that sticks with people. And I think that that's one of the reasons. But then we have to get to the bad. And one of them was actually Congressman Dan Crenshaw, very stilted speech. I think it was on a gunship or a battleship or something like that. But a lot of people took notice. He didn't mention Donald Trump's name once at Donald Trump's convention, making a very basically neocon case on foreign policy. Let's take a listen.
Here's the truth about America. We are a country of heroes. I believe that. So should you. We are a people with a common set of ideals conceived in liberty. People that have sacrificed time and again for our freedom and the freedom of others. That's something no other country ever, anywhere, can claim. Since 9/11, I've seen America's heroes up close. Some of them saved my life. Some of them saved many others' lives. Many of them never made it home. These heroes acted as if the whole struggle depended on them alone, as if any weakness on their part would be a reflection of the whole nation. That's called duty.
Very interesting. So, anodyne speech, bit of a stilted delivery. And again, not mentioning Trump's name one time. He's the only speaker currently to have done so. Is he pulling a Ted Cruz? A lot of people were scratching their heads on that one.
I mean, what do you make of that? Because it's obviously a very intentional move.
It has to be, right?
You see how most of the they go out of their way to praise.
Have you met Trump?
I mean, yeah, exactly. Obviously, you know what this guy wants. He really doesn't care about the substance of what you say as long as you praise him appropriately. What do you think's going on there?
I don't know. I mean, he hasn't answered any questions. Some people were like, maybe it was an oversight. I'm like,
it's not an oversight.
I find that very difficult to believe.
Another one that we think we both sort of put in the bad category was Mike Pence's big speech. It was the keynote of the night. And it was, number one, it was just sort of standard issue, boilerplate, conservative, could have been given at any convention for any president effectively. And then also, again, most of the attacks on Joe Biden from Pence were of the socialism, Marxism, radical left, Trojan horse variety, which I just don't think sells whatsoever. I just don't think it lands. And again, is exactly the playbook that they run against every single Democrat every cycle, no matter what. Let's take a listen to a little bit of Vice President Pence.
Joe Biden criticized President Trump following those decisions. Decisions to rid the world of two terrorist leaders. But it's not surprising, because history records that Joe Biden even opposed the operation that took down Osama bin Laden. It's no wonder that the Secretary of Defense under the Obama-Biden administration once said that Joe Biden has been, and I quote, wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. But as President Trump said, where Joe Biden sees American darkness, we see American greatness.
And he did a lot of this, claiming that Biden wants to defund the police, which he doesn't, and people don't really buy, essentially saying that he's not a patriot, that he doesn't believe in America, that he's going to end America. And I just don't think that any of this ultimately lands. The piece we played there was actually some of the better argument against him.
Yeah.
Like, the foreign policy stuff is real. I think people can buy it. I think people can believe it. I also think it's not nearly even close to the top of the list of what people are thinking about this election cycle. And that's the other piece that, look, I know I say it every day, and I'm going to keep saying it every day. The lack of care and concern for the millions of people who are jobless and struggling to stay in their homes, struggling to feed their families at the DNC and now the RNC is just flabbergasting to me. All the issues that you choose to focus on, and you don't have any time to care about what people are going through right now today?
Yeah, but don't worry, Krystal. Jeff Bezos just hit $200 billion in his net worth.
Oh, cool.
So
that's great. I'm sure that's going to trickle down, right, guys?
That's right.
All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radar, so that's next.